Now we've got these oversight committees that really act as little more than cheerleaders for the CIA. It's up to these members of Congress to tell the CIA, no, you can't do that. No, you can't have a torture program or an illegal rendition program or an archipelago of secret prisons around the world. You can't transform yourself without congressional approval into a paramilitary organization. You can't set up an assassination squad that travels around the world to just carry out hits of people whose politics you don't like. And we just don't get that kind of oversight anymore.
I want to dive back into this interview between Chris Hedges and former CIA officer and whistleblower John Kariakou. More specifically, their conversation about how the very elected government committees formed to oversee the CIA were being watched and overseen by the CIA itself. This is not news. At least it shouldn't be to most, but it doesn't make the subject any less chilling or important. The CIA uses leverage in all manner of ways to keep elected officials in check. After all, Chuck Schumer himself let the truth slip when talking to Rachel Maddow just a few years ago.
But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
In fact, when the Senate Oversight Committee and Dianne Feinstein were investigating the agency for wrongdoing, she and all her aides and colleagues were spied upon by the CIA, according to John Brennan himself.
Without prior notification or approval, CIA personnel had conducted a search. That was John Brennan's word, of the committee computers at the off-site facility. This search involved not only a search of documents provided by the committee, by the CIA, but also a search of the standalone and walled-off committee network drive, containing the committee's own internal work product and communications.
So if the CIA doesn't actually take orders from the elected government and have varying means of influencing elected officials, what are they up to? Well, that is no mystery either. They are the gangsters of Wall Street and the unaccountable sharp edge of the Empire Saber. But let's dive a bit deeper into this interview and react to the words and thoughts of both Chris Hedges and John Kariakou.
Joining me to discuss the CIA, how it has evolved, how it sees its mission, what it does, how it works, and the effects of its clandestine operations around the globe is John Kariakou. So, John, in theory, the CIA is subject to oversight by Congress and the Inspector General throughout the intelligence community, but this oversight has been weakened almost to the point of non-existence. And I wondered if you could talk about the nature of the oversight and the consequences of the lack of oversight.
Sure, Chris. First of all, thanks for having me. You're right about oversight. Oversight was a very serious thing beginning in 1975, and it was certainly serious through the Reagan administration into the end of the 1980s. There were members of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence that took their oversight duties very, very seriously. And that began to weaken in the 90s. And then it changed utterly when the 9/11 attacks took place. Now we've got these oversight committees that really act as little more than cheerleaders for the CIA. It's up to these members of Congress to tell the CIA, no, you can't do that. No, you can't have a torture program or an illegal rendition program or an archipelago of secret prisons around the world. You can't transform yourself without congressional approval into a paramilitary organization. You can't set up an assassination squad that travels around the world to just carry out hits of people whose politics you don't like. And we just don't get that kind of oversight anymore.
Oversight and regulation of the CIA much like corporations, banks, has been completely and utterly weakened, severely weakened in the past decades. Now, this whole interview is from the perspective of a CIA person. So obviously he has, in some ways, a way more negative view of the CIA than a lot of outsiders, but also a more positive view of the CIA than outsiders. So I do like to acknowledge that when we are listening to the words of John Kariakou, this was a person who at one point was a true believer. And that's why he was a member of the CIA. So let's remember that. John is saying, basically, pre-1975, there's no oversight. You know, from the Iran-Contra scandal to the toppling of Iran, all the way back to the Banana Wars and Smedley Butler. And then according to Kariakou, during the 70s and 80s and some of the 90s was the golden period of oversight over the CIA, where they actually were behaving more like a regulated body. So just like Coinky Dink, the 1990s were the great unregulation period. The CIA also started to step out of the shadow of regulation in the 90s, just like telecommunications, the banks, etc. We're talking about 9/11. We're talking about how September 11th changes everything. You know, we're going from a decade's process of weakening these regulations of the CIA to overnight just throwing them all out. You know, the very instruments of regulation that were supposed to regulate, you know, make demands of the CIA turned into their biggest cheerleaders. John lists out a long list of crimes of the CIA. You know, toppling governments, torture program, drone program, etc., CIA black sites, etc., etc.
We had the Feinstein report, and the CIA really effectively railroaded her, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, they did. You'll recall, too, that John Brennan, when he was the CIA director, as that report was being researched and written, ordered CIA officers or CIA contractors, it's never really been clear, to hack into the Senate Intelligence Committee's computer systems to see what it was that these investigators were gathering. And, you know, even though that was referred to the Justice Department in a crimes report, there was never any investigation and certainly never a prosecution.
Well, I remember she was quite shaken by Feinstein by that.
Oh, yes.
And gave a kind of very chilling press conference that basically said these people are unaccountable, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. In fact, Dianne Feinstein had a reputation as being one of the most pro-CIA members of the U.S. Senate. And for her to go onto the floor of the Senate and accuse, in very plain English, the CIA director of committing a crime, a felony, was a very big deal. It was a turning point for her.
Dianne Feinstein being hacked by the CIA. The hacking was done by none other than John Brennan, former head of the CIA, now senior analyst at MSNBC. So can we just, a quick aside here, talk about how Operation Mockingbird has fully come to completion. We have, instead of the CIA infiltrating newsrooms, instead of the CIA dropping misinformation to chosen journalistic sources and manipulating the news that way, they now will be hired by these news corporations. They don't need to put on a mask. They can go out and disseminate misinformation and disinformation straight to the American public while getting paid. Ridiculous. And just a quick aside here, just focusing a little more on, you know, John Brennan and all the other CIA spooks hired by all the corporate media. Let's look at this clip of John Brennan. They're going to ask him to set the tone of the whole conversation. So this clip has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, but it is some additional evidence to show you how utterly corrupt and corrosive the corrupt corporate media is. They have paid liars, known liars, coming on TV to be an analyst for you. And not only that, but they're going to go to him first to allow him to set the tone of the entire conversation.
Director Brennan, I start with you. The legal process is something that we've all, people outside of the legal system have become familiar with just by virtue of the nature of Trump's presidency and now his sort of...
Now back to the CIA hacking computers. Although this was all out in the open, although Dianne Feinstein had a press conference with cameras there, was in Congress talking about how the CIA is unaccountable and hacked her computers. The Justice Department never, ever opened an investigation. So let me ask you, if an old rich white lady who also happens to be a U.S. senator, if she cannot get justice, do you think you will get justice in this country? She was one of the most, if not the most, pro-CIA, pro-intelligence community member of Congress there was out there. And they strong-armed and spied on her, even though when it all comes said and done, she probably would still be their cheerleader. So someone who, you know, doesn't really threaten their power, but nominally her position threatens their power and that investigation threatened their power, they targeted her. One of the most powerful people in the country, one of the most pro-intelligence community people in the country was targeted by that said intelligence community. So they will target any and all that threaten their power. From a regular Joe Schmo to a senator of the United States to a president of the United States. We already heard Chuck Schumer talk about there's 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you. And they were talking about Donald Trump there. They will go after anyone, whether they're foreign, domestic, powerful, or powerless. If you threaten their money or their power, they will come after you.
And what are the consequences of essentially removing this kind of oversight?
Yeah, the consequences of removing real oversight, true oversight, is you end up with a rogue organization. The nature of the CIA is to push the envelope. The nature is to see what it is that they can get away with, on the one hand. On the other hand, the nature is to try to recruit these members of the oversight committees, to make them feel like they're one of the guys. They're part of this secret team. They're insiders. Everybody's working together. And that way you can get away with things that you otherwise wouldn't get away with or wouldn't attempt. Well, that's not what the role of an oversight committee is supposed to be. The role of the oversight committee is to say no. The role of the oversight committee is to say, you can't do that because it's illegal. And the committee just doesn't do things like that. I'll give you one example.
The CIA indeed is a rogue organization. And he's more specifically talking about how the CIA keeps their power to do whatever they want, how they keep themselves unleashed with their relationship to the elected officials who are put in these committees of oversight to try and regulate and control the CIA. So one of the tactics of control that the CIA uses over these elected officials who are in turn supposed to be controlling them is to feed them information and inflate their egos to make them more pliable. More pliable because they have fear of loss of access to that information or to that personnel. It reminds me of, access journalism that corporate media practices with politicians, which is the very same access journalism that was learned from bullshit TMZ types retaining their access to celebrities. So in another word, John Kariakou is talking about how they're bringing these senators and congressmen in and they're making them feel part of the team. They're feeding them information, making them feel like they're really making a difference, and they're privy to information that other people aren't privy to. And it's all bullshit. It's bullshit mechanism of control to keep them under their thumb. That's all it is. That's all it is. They keep them under their thumbs by providing them membership to the club.
When I got home from prison, I was invited to a reception, and there was a Democratic senator at this party. He was a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he was not really happy to see me. And I was perfectly happy making him feel uncomfortable. So I walked right up to him, and he said hello, and I said hello, Senator. And I knew him from when I was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff. I said, Senator, I got to tell you, I'm disappointed that I couldn't count on your support when all of this went down. And he got very angry, and he said, look, it takes all my energy just to not lose my security clearance. And man, that made it completely clear to me that there afraid of oversight. They're afraid of being threatened by the CIA. They're afraid of losing their security clearances. And so they carry out this charade where they pretend to conduct oversight, and then really behind closed doors, they just do what the CIA tells them to do. That's what it's come down to.
And so last clip here, John Kariakou is telling an anecdotal story about how after when he got out of prison, after serving his time for his whistleblowing, how he saw an elected official at an event, and he confronted him because he wanted to know why this elected official didn't stand up for him when he went through his ordeal and was imprisoned for doing the right thing. These elected officials are so influenced by the CIA games that they would sit by and let a patriot go to jail for doing the right thing. They would sit by and let a whistleblower go to jail for trying to uphold the Constitution. They're doing all of that out of fear of loss of access. The guy was saying, I gotta, you know how hard I gotta work to keep my security clearance, blah, 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 bleep, blah, bloop. And not only that, not only is this guy overlooking horrible crimes and the trampling of the Constitution so he can keep his security access. Not only that, but he's angry at the victim, at the whistleblower, at John Kariakou for even bringing it up. The guy who went to prison is calm, cool, and collected and asking this guy, you know, why didn't you stand up for me and do the right thing? And the guy's, oh, you know how hard it is to keep my act. He's yelling at John Kariakou like, you're an idiot. I had to do this. This, you know. Meanwhile, John Kariakou is a whistleblower for exposing torture program. That story highlights and brings into focus, I guess, the very essence of this video. There is no oversight of the CIA. They are a rogue paramilitary organization. Elected officials are so afraid of losing, you know, their carrots or seeing the potential stick of the CIA that they charade an oversight of the agency. They don't actually do anything. They go through the motions and charade oversight of the agency. And to be honest, that reminds me of just about every single other regulatory body within the United States government and its relationship to the very industry it is supposed to oversee. We have a corrupt CIA. It's rogue, it's a private army, and they're the gangsters of Wall Street. They answer to no one but profits. They're unaccountable. They have a black budget, and they have the full backing of, you know, the US military when shit hits the fan. It's fucking ridiculous.
What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils? Huh?